My name is Chase, and I'm the lead pastor here at River's Edge, and I want to start today with just a question for you. Have you ever felt like you were being judged when you don't think you should have been judged? Raise your hand, come on, it's okay. I'm judging you right now if you're not raising your hand. You ever felt that way? I honestly feel this way often in my life. I feel like I'm being judged, maybe because I'm an insecure human being, but I feel this way often. Normally around the simple things and like little things, and I'll say those because they're kind of silly, and maybe you'll understand the point I'm going after. Like some of you right now are judging me. I know it. Some of you, maybe it's the shoes. Did you see them? Huh? Hey. Maybe it's the shoes. They're ridiculous looking. I understand. But they might be the most comfortable shoe I've ever put on in my life. I saw a young adult wearing them. I was like, I got to see what those are all about. Put them on. I was like, ooh. It was like I stepped into a cloud. So for Father's Day, I made sure that I bought some used ones because they're also way too expensive. So you're probably judging me for that too. Or maybe it's not the shoes for you today. It's the hair. I know. It might be the hair. You might be thinking, why in the world would a pastor have a man bun? Well, the pastor has a man bun because his wife likes it, so, I'm okay with that. She likes the hair like this, so I don't really care if you like it or not. I'm good. Or maybe it's the shirt. You're like, hey, you're the pastor of the church. Getting up to preach, shouldn't you have a button up or a collar or something? Well, this shirt is a soccer jersey from Guatemala. It represents one of the missions organizations that we support, Manos de Jesus. So there is a reason why I put it on this morning. Maybe it's the pants, because you're like, Chase, come on, man, they're too tight. Anyway, let's not talk about that, all right? Because I would like to say it's because I've been working out so much that my legs are just getting bulkier, but it might just be because I'm eating so much that my legs are getting bulkier. But have you ever just felt like you're being judged in some way? Now, I feel this judgment, or I think about this judgment because there's been many times in my life, specifically in the church, spent my whole life in the church, been a pastor for many years, and specifically in the church, where I have felt and have people said things to me that weren't so kind about the way that I look. I've had someone come up to me the very first time I met them on a Sunday morning, and they said, this is our first time here, but I'm not really sure what I think about a pastor with a hair like that. I was like, hi, I'm Chase, nice to meet you. So glad you're here today. I've had people growing up, when I would wear blue jeans to church, that they would have conversations with me about that you need to dress up a little bit more for God. You gotta put on your best. And I was like, blue jeans might be my best. and the craziest one, but also maybe the funniest one, and it wasn't here, so don't feel bad, but I was a pastor at a church, and in a church lobby, someone came up to me and said, she said, your beard makes you look like a terrorist. I said, good to see you. I love you. And thankfully, I know the lady. She loved me, but she didn't love my beard. I'm just being honest. So I say all that because I felt some of those things, and so I'm pretty insecure sometimes and feel like I'm being judged when I shouldn't be judged. It's kind of funny, though, when you think about it. We're very good at pointing out things we don't like about other people, but we don't like to receive judgment ourselves. You agree? It's pretty easy to look at you and find all your flaws. It's harder to look in the mirror and see areas that maybe we need some judgment, maybe we need some critique, maybe we need some help. We even say things like, don't judge me. You've done that before? Like, you eat the third cookie and the person looks at you and go, hey, don't judge me. Oftentimes when me and my wife will get a snack after the kids go upstairs and go to bed, we'll walk into the other room and we'll see each other and we go, don't judge me for this. I know we already had dinner. Don't judge me. I'm hungry. Or we say things like, only God can judge me, which is partially true. But we like to put that out there because we don't like judgment upon us. We don't like to be judged. So the question I've been thinking about is judgment a bad thing? And the question I want us to think about today is, should we judge other people? Like, should we not? Or should we? Should we judge other people? That's the question I want you to be chewing on. Hopefully it will pop up there and you can think about that for a moment. And I'm going to answer this question in a confusing way. My answer to this question is yes and no. And the time we're going to spend together having a conversation, I hope to unpack that answer and why I would give that according to God's word together. And what I try to say, honestly, every week, my hope and prayer It's the same for the day, is that as we open God's word, that you would be encouraged, but also challenged. Because I think God's word has this unique ability to encourage us and build us up, while at the same time pointing out and convict and challenge us. And I hope that today is no different when we do that as we look in our Bible today. We're still in our series called 1 Corinthians, where we've been for the last few weeks. We've been looking at one verse out of one chapter from the book of 1 Corinthians and trying to walk away with one challenge, keeping it very, very simple so that we can actually walk away and make some changes in our life so that we can live more like God would desire us to live. And so we're in chapter 5 of 1 Corinthians. If you have a Bible, it's in the back half, the New Testament. You got to go and find in the New Testament, there's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and then what's next? Acts, Romans, then 1 Corinthians. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I forgot which one came first, Romans or Acts, so just keep going. If you hit 2 Corinthians, you went too far, because 1 and 2, 3, that's how counting works, in case you weren't sure. So 1 Corinthians chapter 5, here's our one verse for today. One of my favorite verses in the New Testament. It says this: "It isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders, but it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside the church who are sinning." It's not my responsibility to judge outsiders, but it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside of the church who are sinning. Paul is writing this to a group of people, a church that is relatively new. Lots of new Christians are trying to figure out how to live like Jesus would have them live. And he points out two different groups of people in here: those outside of the church or faith, and those inside of the church or faith. So people who followers of Jesus and people who are not followers of Jesus, believers and unbelievers. He kind of separates into two groups, and he says what I think is abundantly clear: it is not our responsibility to judge outsiders. Meaning, listen closely, we shouldn't expect non-Christians to act like Christians. Or maybe I could say it this way. Here's how I would say it. We shouldn't be shocked when people who don't follow Jesus act like people who don't follow Jesus. That shouldn't surprise you. We shouldn't be shocked when we see that. And for our time today, because we're talking about judgment, we're talking about how we judge people, I'll say it this way. We, as followers of Jesus, are not called to judge people who don't follow Jesus for not following Jesus. Ooh. Don't you just love when the Bible talks about things that are a little uncomfortable? I love it because I get to stand on the stage and look at all your faces while we talk about the uncomfortable stuff. We're not called to judge people who don't follow Jesus for not following Jesus. We shouldn't be shocked when this happens. It's not our responsibility. So I want you to stop. Some of you need to stop right now and only listen to this part of the message. Like some of you, this is such a problem or a struggle in your life that you need to write that down, screenshot that, take that home, memorize that, because you have a problem with judging people who don't follow Jesus, expecting them to follow Jesus. Some of you have an expectation for everyone in your family to follow the way of Jesus, even when some of your family is not followers of Jesus. Some Christians have an expectation for everyone at their job to live according to God's word and God's ways, even though they're not believers. Some of us in the room have an expectation for everyone in this country to follow the morality of Jesus and to live and act and behave like a Jesus follower, where not everyone in this country is a Jesus follower. Some of us do a fantastic job of judging people outside of the family of God by the rules set by those within the family of God. But I think it's clear, it is not your responsibility to hold other people to the standard by which followers of Jesus are called to. Now, I just want to be clear, because some of you are like, what? This doesn't sound right. So everybody just live however they want to live? That's not exactly what I'm saying. I want to be clear and say this, that the way of Jesus is the greatest way to live on this planet Earth. Following after the life and teaching of Jesus is the greatest way to live. The fact that we have good news, Christians, followers of Jesus, have the greatest news on the planet to share with people. And it's for anyone and everyone. And it's good news that leads you to a life following after Jesus. But it's not our responsibility to judge or hold outsiders to our insider way of life. So some of you may be saying, well, whose job is it? If it's not my job, whose job is it? Well, the next sentence, Paul tells us. He tells us very clearly, God will judge those on the outside. Some of you are trying to do God's job, and you are trying to hold other people outside of the faith accountable to follow after Jesus. And it's not your job, it's God's job. It's his job. And he's much better at it than you. He's much better at his job, and we need to let him do his job. Too many Christians are trying to do a job they're never meant nor qualified to do. It's God's job to judge those outside of the faith on how they live in this life and what they do with the good news of Jesus. Now, if you're listening today and you're just checking this Jesus thing out, like you would say, I'm not a follower of Jesus, I'm not a Christian, I would put myself in the outside of the faith or church category. Let me just say something to you. I want to apologize for Christians that have shown more judgment towards you than love. I want to say I'm sorry if you've heard more about the ways you're not behaving right than you've heard about the invitation that Jesus has for you to belong to something amazing. There is an invitation from Jesus to follow after his way and his life that he has for you. And it's a really, really, really good invitation. It's not an invitation to fix your behavior and then you can belong. It's an invitation to belong to his family and let him begin to shape and guide and mold your life. And I'll be real with you, if you're not a follower of Jesus, when you do give your life to him and put your faith in him, when you do say, I believe he came and died and rose again for me, and I want to start following after his way of life, I want him to be the Lord and leader of my life, when you do that, I just be real, your life will begin to change. Because the way of life that Jesus has for all of us is different than the way that we would do on our own. And it's different than the way that the world would try to tell you to live. Jesus' way of life will begin to change you, and he'll begin to mold and shape you, but it's him leading you and guiding you. I'll say what I always say, there's no better life than a life following after Jesus. I can promise you that. We do have really, really good news. I mean, the invitation that we want to invite you to is really, really great. We have really good news that the way of Jesus leads to peace in times of uncertainty. That the way of Jesus leads to hope when your life feels hopeless. That the way of Jesus brings you into a place where there's family when you feel alone. The way of Jesus brings God's goodness and his faithfulness. It brings his provision and his power. The way of Jesus brings you a friend that's closer than a brother and a future that lasts forever. I mean, we have some really good news that we want to invite you to if you don't follow the way of Jesus. It's really, really good news. It comes with forgiveness for all the ways that you've messed up and sinned against God. It comes with a home in heaven and a king to lead and guide your life here and now. There is no better life than a life following after Jesus. And I want to encourage you, don't let the judgment of some Christians keep you from the love of God through a relationship with Jesus. Because Christians, we're called not to judge people who don't follow Jesus for not following Jesus. It's not our responsibility. Now, if you notice though, in our verse that we had up here, there is another group of people. So the answer was, no, we shouldn't judge, but also what? Yes, because there's another group of people. It is certainly your responsibility to judge those inside of the church who are sinning. It is certainly your responsibility to judge those inside the church. So I'll say this, I think it is abundantly clear that it is our responsibility to judge those inside of the faith or inside of the church who are sinning. Let me say it this way. I kind of wrote it up a different way. Maybe. Hey, that worked. You see that? Couldn't do that again if I tried. I would say this way. We should help other followers of Jesus follow the way of Jesus. But again, specifically for our time today, we're talking about judgment, we're talking about accountability, we're talking about critique. So I'll say it this way, it is our responsibility. We are responsible for helping hold Jesus followers to Jesus standards. Guess what? You can judge somebody. Can't judge this. No, you can't. You can't. You should. We are responsible for helping hold Jesus followers to Jesus standards. And what I want us to understand from this short verse, this simple verse, is that we should judge some people. We should look at the life of certain people and lovingly call them out when they're not living according to the ways of Jesus. It's called accountability. It's good. Now, when you hear this, you think, I can judge people. That's the first idea you get from this. And you're really excited about that. We get to judge other people, and that's partially true. But what I would argue is it doesn't mean that we get to judge anyone and everyone just because they call themselves a Christian. I'll share in just a few moments. I think there are a few pieces to the puzzle on who you should speak that accountability into and where you should receive that from. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But before we get there, I want to tell you what this verse also means. Are you listening? Are you on the edge of your seat? One in the front is. That's all I needed, just one. Let me say this. Not only are we responsible to judge those inside of the church, but it also means that we need to invite and be open to other Christians holding us accountable. I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, nope, not me. I'll sign up to judge them, but I don't want nobody telling me how to live my life. I know you're thinking that because I think that. Hey, I'll sign up to help you. I'll sign up to point out your issues. I'll sign up to tell you where you are falling short. But I don't want anybody coming along and pointing out the struggles and areas in my life that I need fixed. It's much easier to see where other people are falling short than to even hear someone else talk about where we are. But what if, guys, what if we leaned into this? What if we welcomed critique into our lives? What if we invited people to point out ways that we're not following Jesus well? What if we were open to that and we asked for help in that area? What if we were quick to listen and slow to speak? And what if we didn't just listen, but we actually did something with what we heard? I wonder what would happen in our spiritual journey if we did this. Now, I said a minute ago that I don't think this verse gives us license to judge anyone and everyone who calls himself a Christian, but I think there's a few pieces of criteria that I would suggest on how we apply this verse to our life. First, the people you engage in this accountability with must be inside the faith. We know that, right? That was clear. They have to be part of God's family. They have to be another Christian. They have to be inside the faith. They first need to be followers of Jesus because it's not our job to judge those outside of the faith. But then there needs to be what I'll call a relationship. If you remember the verse says those inside the church. And I think this is an important piece. This small idea matters. Paul's writing this to a church group that he knows. And he's writing this to a church group that had written to him some letters, and he was writing them back, and he finds out there's some stuff going on inside their church where there's some Christian in their church community that's doing some things that Christians shouldn't do. And he finds out that this church community is not only aware of what's happening, but they're like proud of it. They're okay with it. They're like kind of boasting about it. And he's like, whoa, Christians don't live like that. And because this person is inside of your church, you have a relationship with them. You know them. You're close to them. They're a part of your gathering. You need to do something about it. You need to say something. It is your responsibility because you have a relationship with this person. Now, I will say, I think there may be times where we as Christians need to call out other Christians even if we don't know them very well. But to be honest, I think those are few and far in between. Is that how the saying goes? Or far and few in between? Whatever that saying is, I think it's less often that and more often, who do you have a close relationship with? The other piece to the puzzle, I think, would be trust, because it matters how close you are with the person that you're holding accountable or that you're inviting in to speak critique into your life. And the key part of this relationship is, do you trust them? Trust is that third piece to the puzzle, that you have to have a relationship with them, you need to trust them, and you need to know that they love you and they want what's best for you, so that you can hear them say, hey, I got something to tell you that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear. Proverbs, one of my favorite Proverbs, says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds, the critique, the advice of a friend. A friend can come to you and say, hey, I love you so much, but I'm seeing something in your life that doesn't line up with who you want to be or who you're representing. And I know you don't want to hear this, but I got to tell you something. And you can trust those words from a friend because they're faithful words. You can trust them because you have a relationship with them and you love them, you're close with them. They're friends that can say things that maybe you don't always want to hear. Trust is a key piece to walking in critique and accountability and judgment. So when they're a follower of Jesus who you have a close relationship with and you've built trust with, then I would argue it is your responsibility to judge them when they sin. Don't judge or critique them based upon their clothes. Don't judge or critique them based upon issues in faith that God gives us freedom to have differences. But when they are not following after the life and teaching of Jesus, when they are stepping outside of the standard that God has for followers of Jesus, when they're doing things they shouldn't or not doing things they should, we are responsible to help people out. Not only do we do this for others, but we invite it into our own life as well. Here's what makes critique so much easier when you ask someone to give it. It always goes over better that way. When we as followers of Jesus, I think we need to be able to be honest with ourselves and recognize that you and I have blind spots in our life and in our faith. What if we could invite a close friend into our life to ask us some questions like this? Check out these questions I kind of just put together simply. Something along this lines. What if you'd be willing to ask a close friend, hey, is there any area of my life you think I could grow in to be more like Jesus? You see a different perspective than I see. When I look in the mirror, I'm doing pretty stinking good, all right? But you might be able to see something I can't see. Or do you see anything in my life that may not be representing Jesus well to others? What do you see that I can't see? What do you see in my life that I can't see? What are the blind spots that you see? What if you and I would actually ask people to do this? What if we would invite people to do this? Here's what I'll say though. Warning, don't ask the question if you can't handle the response. Don't say, no, I want the truth. You can't handle the truth, right? You know what I'm saying? Don't ask the question if you can't handle the truth. Something I've kind of adopted in my life over the last few years that I'm not great at. So I'm gonna tell you, it's a really good thing, and if you could do this better than me, it would be good, because I'm not great at it yet. But I'll say it this way, critique doesn't always need defense. I would like to say that I love to learn about people and study people. I like to people watch, and because I've seen my own life and I've dealt with other people, here's what I've learned. Most of the time, the first thing we do when someone critiques something about our life, something we did, something we could have done better, we automatically respond with defense. Well, the reason that I did that was, or you don't know, and you know what most of us do? Not only do we defend our actions, but we turn it around on them. This is like I don't know if it's psychology, but it's something I would say I've seen all the time. The first thing we do, well, you don't do this right. Well, yeah, but you know what you don't do right? Give you an insight into my marriage. No, it's all my fault. Trust me. So here's the thing. So sometimes I drink soda. No, all the time I drink soda. I know it's not good for me, but let's not talk about that right now. And I drink cans, and I've learned to live in Michigan, you recycle cans, and I never do that before. And we have a bag in our garage that we can put our cans in, and what I like to do is wait till I have like 7 cans to take all out at once. So I just set my cans on the same place in the counter by the garbage can. And my wife will lovingly come to me and say, hey, is it really hard for you to take those over to the bag, like right when you're done with them? And you know, the first thing I see is like, hey, this kind of bugs me when you just leave piles of cans. The first thing I do, well, you know what bugs me about you? She's like, well, I was just telling you this thing that I didn't love. And I'm like, well, you know, I'll tell you some things I don't love. Because I'm defensive, because I don't want someone to tell me I'm doing something wrong, so I want to push back. Or just this last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, she was like, hey, Gideon and Chase, Gideon's my son, it must be a guy thing. She's like, your shoes are here. If you take one step, there's the shoe closet. Your shoes are always here. There's where they belong. Can you just pick them up? I don't really want to pick up after you. And the first thought in my mind was, you know how much I pick up after other people in our house? That's what I first thought, because I got defensive, because she was critiquing something about me, and all I wanted to do was turn it right back on her. But guys, it doesn't always need a defense. Because they love you and you trust them. You can trust that they want what's best for you and they want to see you be at your best. And so if they have some critique, it's okay. What if you and I learn to just say, I didn't see it that way. You're right. One step. And I can put those shoes right where they belong. You know what? It only takes 5 steps to get from where I set my can to where the cans belong. I could do that for you. Because I know you love me and care about me. That's a silly example, but man, I'm telling you, so many people, when you begin to critique, our first response is we want to defend and point it back on them. I would encourage you to try this with your spouse. Hey, honey, you love me? Do you see any areas in my life that I don't see? Any ways that I'm not representing Jesus well? Any ways that I'm not following Jesus well? Because your spouse sees you so close, and she sees you when not everyone else sees you. And if we would invite this and then not respond with defense or turn it back on them, you know what would happen? I believe your life, you'd have growth. Your spiritual walk, you'd have growth. And honestly, in the relationship with who you invite that into, you'd have growth. If you're a parent in the room today, ask your kids. If they're old enough and understand, hey, anything you see in my life where I don't reflect Jesus well? Ask them. And give them permission to be honest with you. If you're a young adult or a teenager in the room, ask your mom and dad. They've been waiting. Ask, and don't try to defend. Invite this because Paul says it is our responsibility to judge those within the church, within the faith, people we have close relation with. It's our responsibility to do that. And not only that gives us the freedom to do that in others' lives, but it means that we need to be open, and I think it means we need to actually invite it into our life as well. Faithful are the wounds of friends. But specifically, we've been talking not just critique and silly things like clean up your cans, Chase. It's about sin in your life. Ways that we're missing the mark in following Jesus and the teachings of Jesus. Ways that we're not representing Jesus well. Ways that we're not honoring and obeying God. It's our responsibility to judge those who are inside the church who are sinning. And this means that you have to call it out in those close, trusted Christian relationships, and it also means that you need to be open with being called out by close, trusted Christian friends. It is your responsibility to do this. Paul writes in another letter the exact same thing, but in a little bit different way that I think he adds some extra pieces that are worth looking at before we close today. Galatians chapter 6. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back on the right path. Be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ." Again, you see him saying you're to call out another Christian when they sin, another brother or sister, you who are godly. So if you're a follower of Jesus, you call out sin in another follower of Jesus' life, but you do it gently and humbly. This is how to come with critique or judgment or accountability. We do it gently and humbly. But look at this word, share each other's burdens. This is how we share each other's burdens. When another believer comes to you and says, hey, I see something in your life that I don't think you want in your life, and can I just point it out because I love you? What they're doing is they're saying, hey, can I take that burden off your shoulder and help you carry it? And when you go to another believer and you say, hey, I want to help you, what you're doing is say, hey, I want to share this with you. I want to share your burden, because some of us in the room right now, we have some burdens that we don't even see. We're not even aware of, but other people are noticing something about our life going, that just doesn't look right, seem right. I don't know if that's how you want to be represented and seen by the world around you. And I love you and I want to say something, but I don't want defense and I don't want you to turn it back on me. But it's here. That's how we share each other's burdens, the way that we help that out. It's actually how we obey the law of Christ. The law of Christ is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Love your neighbor as yourself, or love others as Jesus loved them. Jesus said, I want you to love people the way I love people. Not the way you would love people, but the way I love people. That's his law for us. It's sharing the burdens. You can call it critique or judgment or accountability. I'm going to start calling it sharing burdens. It doesn't sound as harsh. It helps me realize what they're trying to do is help me because they love me. And what I'm trying to do is help you because I love you. If you're my close, trusted friend who's a follower of Jesus. And we can invite this into our life. We need to invite people to share our burdens. We build relationship with people so we can share burdens. So the question we started with today is, should we judge others? Yes and no. Who you judge and how you judge matters. It is abundantly clear it is not your responsibility or our responsibility to judge those outside of the faith. We're not called to judge people who don't follow Jesus for not following Jesus. That's not our responsibility. But it also is abundantly clear. It is our responsibility to judge those inside the faith who are sinning. We are responsible for helping hold Jesus followers to Jesus standards. We need to do this for others, but we need to invite this into our own life as well. And as followers of Jesus, we need to be able to be honest with ourselves and recognize that we have blind spots in our life and in our faith. So here's the one challenge. Remember, every day is one verse from one chapter, from 1 Corinthians, and we end with one challenge. So here's the one challenge for you today. I want to challenge you to share some burdens. I want to challenge you to share some of your own. Open yourself up for, invite people, like ask someone to point out some areas in your life you may not be representing Jesus well. And I want you to build relationships where there's trust and love, where you can speak and help hold accountable other people in your life. I want to just invite you to share some burdens. I truly believe when you do this, you'll see your life get better. You become a better person. Your faith will grow. And honestly, the relationship with that person that you're willing to engage in this practice with, man, you guys are going to become better friends. Become closer in your marriage relationship, closer in your relationship with your kids or your parents, whoever you invite this with. I really believe you'll see it grow. And if I could share another challenge, which, I technically made up the rules that it was only going to be one challenge, so I guess I can. I would just say some of you, I said it earlier, but I would say some of you need to write this challenge down for yourself, maybe as like a 1A, like a second challenge. Stop judging people who don't follow Jesus for not following Jesus. But if we could, extend to them the love and the grace and the mercy and the goodness that God has given you. Represent Jesus well to them. Talk about how Jesus has impacted your life well to them. Let them see your life and how it might be a little bit different from theirs, and how having God in your life is the best way to live. And then when they start asking questions, when they start to become curious, when they start to say, what is it about your life that's so different? Let me tell you about Jesus. There's no better life than a life following after him. He's the difference. Let me pray. God, we thank you for just the goodness of your word. As I said at the beginning, it has the ability to encourage us, and at the same time challenge us, convict us, stir in our hearts where something needs to change. And I believe there's so many of us in the room that we need this in our life. We need to invite and find other people and open up our life for critique and accountability to help us be more like you. We need those close, trusted friends that we can iron sharpen iron together. We need that. We need to not shy away from that, but be open to that, not defend it, but to be grateful that you have placed us in the ability to find other people, to grow in our relationship with you. That also means we need to grow in our relationship with others. And I just pray that you would encourage someone in here today to do that, to invite that into their life. And God, I pray that you would speak through those people as they begin to speak into our lives. That we would become more like the person that you have created us to be, that we would become more like your son, that we would represent Jesus so well to the world around us that we don't need to judge them and critique them for the way that they're living. They're gonna look at us and they're gonna see you, and they're gonna wanna come and find out what it's all about. May we be a church that displays Jesus so well that our faith becomes contagious. And we can point people to the faithful, amazing, powerful, wonderful, incredible, kind, loving, good, generous God that we serve. Amen.